another router link which would point to this about, and the path was /about. And so we now have our home and about. All that's left is to show the certain things. And for that we have this router view, which we also get from this view router. And so let's import it. After that router link, we bring that router view. And now it's simple. Outside that nav, we simply add this router view. And now if we save it, you see we have this welcome to our shop app with view router, which is coming from home. But then if we click about, first you see in this URL, our URL changed to /about, and it now shows the text from about screen, which is learn all about view router with a shop app analogy. So that was it for using the basics of view router, using router link and router view. And again, this router view simply renders the view, so the component that is attached to the route which you click here in this router link. So with that static routing learned, we can now move to dynamic routing. So what is this static and dynamic routing? You see, static routing is when we click this router links and then we go to the appropriate router view. And that's static because no data is being passed when we click onto a router link to go to a router view, right? But dynamic routing is the situation where when we click a router link or we go to a new page and we send some data, so we send some parameter. And you can think of it as, for example, in the home page, we will now have a list of product, and then when we click on one of the product, we'll go to the product view, so the details of that product. And in doing so, we're going to pass the ID as the parameter to the new view, so we can use that ID to show all the details. And that concept is the dynamic routing, sending dynamic data or parameters within the route. So let's do some preparation. In this home view, I will keep this h1, but then I'm going to add an hr, and then I'll have a list of product. So for the list in the script setup, I'm going to add const products is equals to an array, and in this array I'll have two products, so object literal and then an ID of 1, and I'll give it a name of, let's say, a laptop, and then a new product, so a new object literal, and the ID is of course going to be different, so 2, and the name can be, let's say, mobile, just like that. And now in this template we can use a UL where we can have li item, and in this li item we can use a v-for loop, right? So we do product in products, and because we are using this v-for, we should also add the colon key binding, where I'm simply going to pass a single product and its ID. And we get 2 dots because we have 2 products. Now between this li, I'm also going to render the name, so product.name. And with this, I'll also have a button. So a button where I'm going to say go to details. And of course, I'll need to add a function which I'll add to the @click, to which I'll pass the ID of this product, and using that we will push to the new view. So we will do that later. Let's also add a new product view. So we say product view.view, and here I'll add a template, and for now I'm just going to say product details. So with this configuration done, so with this array and this product view, in the next lecture we are going to plug things together. Also, one more important step to learn before dynamic routes would be how to add named routing. The idea is that for this product view, so where we have this dynamic route, we want to add a new property which is name, and I'm simply going to name it as product. And that's because for in real world application, in real world development, you want names for all the routes. All the different routes should have unique names. That's because you can have a really long path. And imagine if you have to push from one view to the next view, and of course you need to mention the path. So if you have to mention those long paths, it's errorsome, it's error prone. You might write wrong names. And that's the reason we add this name, so we can keep it really short. And the other upside is that names doesn't really change. You might have to change your path depending on the business requirement. So please be careful about this, that you should add names, and names should be unique. Now in the next video we're going to do dynamic routes, and we're going to push those new routes using names. Let's begin. In our home view, we have this button which we want to click to go to that details view. And for that we need to import use router composable from view router. So we do import, and then in curly braces we say use router. Please be sure it's use router, not use route. And this we get from view dash router, right? And because this is a composable, we should execute it, and we will save the result in a variable. So we say const router is equals to that use router. And now we can already use this router in this add click, but to keep things nice looking, I'm going to create a new function which we can hook to this add click. So let's create a new function, and we're going to say go to details, and this function should take an ID. And then in the function body, we use this router, and there the push method. And then this push method will take this object literal, to which we will pass either the path or the name, and we are going to choose the name because that's shorter. So the name was product, if I'm correct. And after that, I also want to pass the ID. So separated by a comma, we say params, and here we pass an ID like this object. And this ID is this ID. So the ID here. So all that's left is that we use it in this add click. So we call this add click here, and there we pass the single product and its ID. With this, we can already click here to go to this product details, and as you can see, this is actually showing up. It says product/1. Now the other thing is that I also want to show this one here from that view router. And now we are going to use route. So in this view, home view, we used use router, and use router is used whenever you want to go to a new page. But now we are going to use route, no R, use route. And use route is used whenever you want to extract details from the current route. So in this product view, let's add a script with the setup. And here I want to import, this time use route, not the router, but the route from view router. And this is also a composable, so we should execute it. So I'm just going to use this as use route. And then I'm going to save it in the variable const route is equals to this. Now all that's left is that we use this route to print out the ID in this template. So I'm just going to add a div here with an h1 where I say product details page, and after that I'll add a p where I say product ID with a colon, and then in double mustache I'm going to access that route that we have, and there the dot params, and there the dot ID. And with that, if we save it, we get this ID from this parameter. So in the last lecture, we saw how we can pass the dynamic parameter, which is the ID, using the view router. And then in product view, we retrieve that ID using that use route. In this lecture, let's also see how we can pass around props using view router. Because as you know, defined props is used to pass data between parent to child. And we can also use that define props whenever we visit a certain view using the view router. So let's go to the about view and let's add a script with setup. And let's add a define props. And in this method, I want to pass an object where I'm expecting a name which is of type string. And then this name, I can output it here in this double mustache by saying name. And with that, if we restart our application, whenever we go to this about, we pass this company name. For example, I change it to Boydutik. So this value of Boydutik in this property name using props. Okay, now let's work with 404 page not found, because it is very likely that a user might come and enter an endpoint that doesn't exist. So maybe this doesn't exist. And in that case, we're still redirecting to our home. The idea is, for better user experience, we want to redirect first to a 404 page, and there we will have a button, also some information like, hey, you were in the wrong place, so 404 page not found, and then a button that would redirect, upon which clicking the user would be redirected to the home view. And to do so, first let's create a view. So I'm going to add a view, and I'm going to say 404 view dot view, and inside I'm going to add a template. So in the template we can write an h1 and there 404 and then maybe page not found. And after that, maybe we can add a router link. So to use the router link, let's import, let's add the script with the setup, and there let's import. What is it we're going to import? So in app view, yeah, we need this router link. So let's grab this and right there, and we don't need this router view, just the router link. So after that, we add that router link, and to this we add this 2, and this 2 should be slash. So with that, we should also plug this 404 in the index.js, which is our router. And there let's import our 404 view. So import, and I'm gonna say 404 view. Oh, this doesn't work. So maybe we should name it view 404. So with that, let's say view 404. Now we have this, and this view 404 should get its own route. And here we're going to add the path, and this path will get certain things. So we're going to say slash colon path match, and here we will pass this single brackets, and inside we're going to say dot and then star, and after this bracket another star. So with that, I'll also give it a name, because we now know how to add names. I'll just name it not found. And with that, we also need the component, and in the component I'm going to pass view 404. And with that, you now see, if we go to certain pages that doesn't exist, for example 1 to 3, just 1 to 3, so we have this page not found. But afterwards I should also have this router. So let's just go there, and we have some sort of an error. This is not really an error, it's just some let's name it not found. And then this not found would be the name of our component. So with that, let's try again, just slash 1 to 3, and we redirect to this 404 page not found. But then again, I think, oh yes, the reason that this thing is not showing up because we haven't added a content yet. So we can say go to home. So we have this. And upon clicking it, we go back. Let's start with route guards and programmatic navigation. Now, what do I mean? For example, in almost all shopping application, someone owns this application, right? An admin who manages this application. And naturally, normal users should not have the access to that admin side of things, because admin there has access to all the products, the orders, money things, and user related stuffs and so on. So to protect such places, we have so-called thing as route guard. The route guard guards that protected route from misleading users, right? So for example, we have a login screen and everything is all right in the login screen. We let the user go, or else we don't let them go. So that would be route guards. And on the other hand, we have this programmatic navigation, which simply means, for example, after a successful login, we automatically make the user push or route to the admin screen, and so on. And for this lecture, I have created this login view, which is a simple template, and let's build it together. So inside we have this div, and h1 that says login. And after this h1, we have this input, and this input is tied by directional binding using this v model, where this username is simply a ref with an empty string. And we also have a placeholder just to see something. And then we have this button, and its @click should do a login. So basically it's a login screen where we have a username input and then a button. And then this button is tied to this login function, which is empty. Likewise, we have this admin view where we have simply this div where it says with the h1 admin dashboard, and the p says only admins can see this page. And next I have imported both of them in this index.js. Now, because this is a short tutorial and we are not really building anything that is full stack, we can only mock certain things. So to mock the login state, I'm going to make a new variable here, and I'm going to name it let is logged in, and I'll set it to false. And this is what we're going to change. So whenever we log in, we're going to change this, so we understand that someone has logged in, so let them go to the admin screen. Of course, in real world application, it will be much bigger, but this flow here will give you a thorough understanding. So later when you implement the real thing, you already know the steps you need to take. And because we have these two routes, we should also import them. So I'll import the login route first of all. I'll add a path, and here I'm going to say /login. And I'm also going to give it a name. So the name is going to be login. And then we need the component, and for the component we pass the login view. And after that, let's add the last route, which would be that admin route. So let's say path, and here we pass /admin. Afterwards, let's also add the name and say admin. Then we add the component, and here we're going to say admin view. So with that, because this admin route is the one that we want to protect, we have to introduce a new property here. That would be this meta property. And in this meta property, we're going to add an object body, so an object literal, and I am going to say require auth. So this basically means that this route here requires something. So, and in this case, it requires auth, which we have set to true. And now the idea is that whenever this router is working, so for example, whenever page changes are happening, or we click somewhere to go to a new route, so in between all the routes, before that, we want to run a function. So a middleware, so to say. So I'm going to add a comment here, and I'm going to say global auth route guard. So, and I'm saying this as a global route guard because the function that we are going to write now, it's going to run before any route firing. So here I'm going to call our router. So this router would be this router, and I'm going to say router dot before each, and this is a method, and this method is a we need to pass a function inside this method where the parameter of the function gets 3 arguments: to, from, and next. So where we are going to, where we are coming from, and what's the next thing to do. So here in the function body, I'm going to do an if check. If to dot meta. So if the place that we are going to, if that has a meta, for example, this route, when we are going to this route, it has this meta because we're going to this route and it has this meta. So to dot meta and dot require auth. All right. And so double and not is logged in. So if it requires auth and we are not logged in that case, I'm going to show an alert that you need to authenticate. All right. And after that, we're going to call this the third argument, this next. And in this next, I'm going to pass this object literal, and I'll pass the name of login. So next, go to login. If it requires authentication and we are not logged in, so go to logged in. All right. Else, just next. So let's just go. All right. Next means let's just go. No problem. And with that, since we have this is logged in and that's something we need to care about, before this export default router, I'm going to make another export, and then this statement, I'm going to say router and also is logged in. So now these are the things that we need to use in this login view. So back at that login view, so back in this login view, let's use it. We have already discussed what this is. Let's work on the function of logging in. So the idea is that we should get that import is login, because in a real world application you might get it from a Pinia store, that auth store, for example, or maybe some composable, but this is just a dummy app. So I'm going to get this is logged in from here, this index.js. So I'm going to import it. Let's say import, and I want to import that is logged in from, it should be at /router/index. So with that, in this login function, my idea is that in the login screen, we have this input. And for now, for the scope of this project, I just want to be able to write admin. If I write admin, it means I am admin. All right, just to keep it simple. So here I'm going to do if that username and its value inside, and also to, I'm just going to make it to lowercase. All right. So if this is triple equals to admin, so if that's the case, I am logged in. I'm going to assume I am logged in. So I'm just going to say is logged in is equals to true. And then I want to do the programmatic navigation. That would be, I want to call the router. So this router, use router. And to this, I want to say push. And in this push, I'm going to pass this object literal, instead of which I'll pass the name. And the name is going to be admin, so the admin screen. And then, so afterwards, I'm going to say else. And in this else, I'm going to add an alert. So if I don't write admin and I write anything else, I'm going to say access denied. Just like that. And actually we have a little bit of problem, my bad. This is logged in is a variable of that index.js. So that is not something we can modify from some other component just like that. So just to make things simple, I'm going to add a function here as well. So for example, function make login, And the job of this function is to set that is logged in to true. And then this make login is what I'm going to export out. And with that, in our home view, we use that make login and we execute this make login. All right? So with that, let's now give it a shot. Let's say /admin. We see you need to authenticate, so click OK. And if we say here client, it says access denied. But if we say admin, we come to this admin dashboard. Perfect. So that was route guards and programmatic navigation. Now, before we wrap this entire section up, a word of wisdom for you. So we know our on-mounted hook from view, we use this because it runs at the start of any page. So when a component gets built, this on-mounted runs. So logically, we might think that in this on-mounted is where we should call future calls. So API calls, calls to server, calls to local storage. Well, the better thing to do when using view router is that we should use this watch method from view, and in this watch method with this immediate true flag, inside of this we should use or call our future calls or our APIs. In this course section, we are going to learn and build this application. And in building this application, we are going to learn how we can render various tabs within a single view. And then we're going to learn about this transition effects, how we can persist all this data throughout multiple app restarts, and how we can use this teleport to render certain objects to a particular place within the screen. Now in this new project, let's do npm space create space view at latest. And with that, let's name our project, and I'm going to name it view dash preferences. And this time we are going to select TypeScript. And at the end, we're going to take this ESLint and prettier. And then we are going to skip all the things, so we get a blank project. And so let's click enter. And with our project now created, let's get that view preferences into our workspace. And before we do npm install, I'll also get Tailwind. So I'm going to search for Tailwind here and click get started. And because we are using Vite, we're going to take this npm install Tailwind at tailwind/Vite. Now back into our project terminal, we're going to paste that command. So we install Tailwind alongside Vue. Now let's just wait a second or two. It should be done in a moment. And here it is. So now let's configure the Tailwind to our Vite plugin. So I'm just going to get this import statement. And this time we're going to come to this vite config ts and paste it here. And then we need to also get this plugin. So we paste it in the plugin. Now with that, we also need to import this Tailwind CSS. So we grab this. And there in our src, we need to create a new folder and we need to call it assets. And there we're going to make a new file and call it main.css, and I'm going to paste that import Tailwind here. So with both of these things added, we need to go to that main.ts, and here we need to make sure that we import that main.cs CSS. So we simply say import, and we're going to do /assets/main.css. Also, we should come to this index.html just to make sure that we are importing that main.css here as well. So after the title, I'm going to do link, and this should have this relationship of style sheet, and in the href, we are going to go to src, there the assets, and there the main.css. So with all of this now added, let's add a color to this body, and let's add a class. And I'm going to pass bg-slate-50. And with that, let's run our project. We do npm space run space dev. And let's click this so we can have a look. And it looks like we are using Tailwind because I can actually change the color here to, let's say, red 500. That works. So let's stick with that bg-slate-50. Okay, so let's start by building the tab button because we will have these tab buttons here, 3 tab buttons to be exact. And also in this particular lecture, I want to focus on how we define props and define emits differently just because we are using TypeScript. So in the components, let's create a new file and I'm going to name it tab button.view. Now inside we need the template, and in the template I'll simply start off by writing this link. And after that we will need our script with the setup. And now the new option here that must be included is this lang option, which gets the value of ts. And that's because we are using TypeScript. So now our focus point, the define props and define emits. Let's start with define props. So like regular, we are going to declare this define props, which is a method. But this time we don't pass an object inside this method, but outside within this angle bracket, we pass this object. Now, before we write the properties of this define props, I'd like to mention that the two things that we need would be the current tab, so the current tab button, because this component will show two different tabs, right? So the button that has already been clicked and it needs to have a bit of a different style, and the other tabs, so the other tab button. And for that we need to get information of the current tab. So current tab, and this will be a string. Now, other than this current tab, we also need the tab, so the general tab. And we are going to say here tab, and this will be a new object which will have a key, which is a string, and a label. So a label which is also a string. So that's how we declare define props in when using TypeScript. Now again, let's also define the emits. So define emits, which is this method. And now we don't declare an array here with our emits name. We don't do that now. Again, outside we have this angle bracket, and there we pass this object body, and inside of this I'm going to name the emit, which is going to be this click. And because this is just the name and nothing else, we're going to declare it with an empty array. That's how we do it. Essentially this is same like doing click. So both of these are the same. This was fine for JS, but for TS we do it this way. Alright, now let's get started by rendering the tab button. But first let's discuss a few things. Our tab buttons will be associated to different components, but that's for later. And for now, we need to, like I said, we need to declare an array that has all these tabs. And to make this tab reusable and safe, I'm going to extract the definition of this tab. So a tab should have a key, which is of type string, and then also the tab should have a label, which is of type string. And I'm going to extract it out into a separate type, so we can then associate this tab with a type. And so I'll just grab this out. So I'm going to cut it, and in our src, I'm going to create a new file, and I'll name it types.ts. And there, because everything has to be exportable, I'm going to do export, and this is going to be an interface of TypeScript, and I'm going to name it tab. And then inside, it's just going to be that. Now we can use it in that tab button.view. So here, we don't have that object literal anymore, but we're going to declare it as the tab. And because we are importing a type, we say import type tab from that at types. And now we have the ability that we can go to that app.view and declare an array that would have three tabs, because in our app we want three tabs, right? Where the first one would be general, the second one would be notifications, and the third one would be privacy. And when declaring an array in this app.view, I might pass a different name for this tab right here, also for this current tab. And so, just to make things more strict and specific, we can use the power of TypeScript. There in that types.ts, I'm going to make another type, which should be exportable. So export, and then it's a type, so the type, and I'll give it a name. Let's name it tab key. And this type should have three possible values, where the first one would be general, the second one can be notifications, and then the third one can be privacy. And now to enforce one of these three values for a tab, we will use this tab key instead of this string for the key of this tab. Now with this, we can already go to app.view and start declaring our objects. Now the first thing is we want to declare the array. So I'm going to say const tab. And this tab is going to be of that tab type. So we bring the tab and we have to import it. And this is going to be an array, so I add this array literal. Now let's assign the value. So we assign this array here, and then we pass three objects. Now you see, with the power of TypeScript, we get suggestions that here we can only pass key and a label, nothing else. And for this key also, I want to pass one of the tab keys, right? So in this string here, if I want suggestion, I then see again I have general, notifications, and privacy. I can't write anything else. I will get an error. So let's pass general. Say general. I'll also keep the label the same as key. So there I say general as well. So then this forms the first tab. Let's create the other two tabs, which would be notifications and privacy. So we add notifications. And for the last one, let's add privacy. So privacy here and privacy there. So this tab is now here as, because we will need to render three tabs and we are going to iterate over it using v-for, and we are going to generate each tab from these objects. And to keep track of which tab is selected, we also need a current tab property. So I'm just going to import ref. So we can do const current tab, which is equals to a ref from view. And there I want to pass one of the three possible values from this tab key. So let's import this as well. So I'll just grab this and pass it here after a comma. And then this ref should be of that tab key. And with that here, if I add a string and if I look for suggestion, I get one of these three values. And I'm going to initialize it with this general. Okay, so now let's start by rendering those tabs, and we are going to style it and also show its active state. So we have quite a bit of work to do. Let's not wait, let's not waste any time, let's get started. I'm going to add a nav element inside of this div, and inside of this nav, I want a UL because I'll have those list items. So inside of this UL, I'll have the LI items, list items. And then in this list items, I'm going to have a v-for binding, so I can loop over these tabs to generate those individual tab. So I get a single tab from that tabs. And for the key for this v-for, I'm going to pass this key, and it gets that single tab and its key. So with that, we don't see anything because we should actually import that tab button. So we bring that tab button. Tab button. And in this tab button then, we are getting an error because we need to pass certain things. We need to pass this tab, so the tab there, and to this tab binded place, we're going to pass this single tab. And then we also have the current tab, and it should be in this bind form. And here we're going to pass this ref, which is this current tab. And so with that, we have this three tabs showing up, and this link is showing from this tab button, and because we have this link text in that template. Now let's style them. I'm going to start in this div. So for this div, the wrapper div, let's add a class, and I'm going to set some max width by doing max dash width, and this should be 2XL. Then let's also add some margin, so mx in the x-axis to auto, and also some padding in the x-axis of 4. Now let's enter the nav element, and let's add a class there. And I'm going to set some font styling, so it should be font medium. And maybe the text could be centered, so text center. All right. Let's now enter the UL. Or maybe we can add some more styling here because it doesn't look really good with this dark black. So just do text gray dash 500. And then I also want to add some borders. So border dash B, and the border color should be border dash gray dash 200. And let's also add some margin to the bottom, MB of 4. Perfect. Now in this UL, let's add the class so we can bring everything in this axis by putting flex. And additionally, I'm also going to add flex dash wrap. Next, let's style this tab button. Now, first things first, in this tab button, first of all, I want to show my tab.label. Perfect. And afterwards, actually, this should be in the button. So in this template, I want to add a button, and then this button gets that. Now with that, in this button, let's add some style, and I'll actually bind to it because I want to add certain style for this default view, but some specific styles when we click onto a button. So here, I'm going to add this object literal, and in single quotes, I'm going to say padding of 4 and border in the bottom of 2. And I'll set this to be true. So with that, if we save, we have something like this. And now in the next video, I'm going to add computed property so we can get the computed style for each of this button when they're clicked. Next, let's work on the active state of this tab. So we should be able to click something and we will have some specific style for the activated tab. And I'm going to reset this zoom. So first I'm going to create a variable and I'm going to name it const is active, and this should be equals to a computed method. Because in this computed, we are going to bring this current tab of this defined props and then calculate certain things. So let's also add a const prop here. And in this computed, we now pass a function. So we now run a function and we call that prop, and there the current tab. And we want to check if the current tab is equals to the tab that we get, and there the key, actually it should be props prop.tab.key. So with this, we can now use this is active in this styles scope. So there I'm going to add some new styles, which should be that border should be transparent if we are not active. And additionally, I want the border to change some color. So the border B should get a blue of 500. And the text should also be of blue 500 when isActive is true. So just like that. Now to make sure that isActive works, we need to plug that define emits that we created earlier. So for this button, let's declare that at, so that on it should be at click. And there we say $emit, and to this emit we want to pass the name, which was this click right here. Now let's handle it there in that app.view. In this app.view, I'm going to come to this tab button, and then here I'm going to say at click. Current tab should now equals to be whichever tab we are clicking, and there the key. And with this, we are setting the current tab to whichever tab that we click. So it now works. Now, lastly, I want to set this margin a bit properly, because here we should add a minus margin. As you can see, this bottom border is a bit down. We should take it a bit up. So we're going to do minus margin bottom of 1 pixel. And with that, if we save it, it's now perfect. For example, if I zoom really in, right? And without this, you see this margin is at the bottom. We want it to be in the same line as this active margin, this active bottom. And that is why we're using this minus margin bottom of 1 pixel. Just like that. So with our tabs being rendered and we now have the ability to change them by clicking onto them, let's now create 3 components that should be associated with each of these tabs. Because when I click general, I want to show a component that is different to these other 2 tabs, right? So first let's create 3 components, and I'm going to do general settings dot view, and then notifications settings dot view, and then privacy settings dot view. And therein, I'm just going to add a template with some dummy text. And for this privacy, I'm going to say privacy. For this notifications, let's say notifications. And for the last one, general, let's say general. Let's now configure our tab such that this tab here, interface tab, doesn't only expect a key and a label, but also a component. So I'm going to add a property component, which should have a value of type component. And this comes from this view, which is a type from view, and its name is component. And now with that, in app.view, of course, we're going to get errors because all these are expecting components. So let's start. This general gets that component property, and the value there should be then that general settings. And we should add an at here. Now for the second one, we add another component, which is that notification settings, and it should be at. And for this last one, it gets a new component, which then should be that privacy settings. And let's also fix this import. So now we have 3 associated components for 3 of the tabs. So with that declaration now done, let's also make sure that we can show those dynamic components. Now, if you think about it, showing this dynamic component is something that we have already done before. Back in View Courses application, for the booking section, we had 2 icons, so two icon component that we showed. And we did that using that dynamic component property. So after this nav, we can add that component, and then this component has this colon is binding where we pass a certain condition which then yields dynamic values, right? I hope you remember that. And now to calculate that thing dynamically, we're going to use a computed state. So here in the setup script, I'm going to add a computed in a variable, and I'm going to name it const current active component is equals to a computed from view. And in this method, I'm going to run a function. So like this. And the function is going to be ran over that tabs array. And in the tabs, I'm going to pass this find method because I want to go through all the tabs. So there, then I get a single tab. And this tab, I'm going to take the key of it. So the tab.key. And I'm going to compare it using this tree comparison to the current tab. And there the value. Now this then, actually it should be right here. And this might also be undefined. So we add this question mark. And then we take the component from inside. Now this current active component is what we are going to pass here. And with that, if we save, we can now see that general is here. If I click here, we now show the notifications. And for privacy, we show the privacy. Our app is now taking shape. And in this app, we have this single screen where we have various tabs that changes components dynamically right here. And here, I now want to introduce transition because this dynamic component is a great use case to wrap transitions in. So in Google, search for view transition and you will see this link where if we visit, we see that transition itself is a component. So let's grab this and let's use it. Now, the idea is simple. We take this dynamic component and we place it inside this transition. Now, one thing you need to be sure, all these components, all these dynamic components must have a root element. Like we have here. We have a div inside of these templates. And also here. Now, all we have to do is grab this CSS and we have the style scoped block. There we can just add those CSS. And with that in our app, if we restart, we have this transition going on. And you can see we have a bit of layout shift, which we can prevent simply by coming to this transition and adding a mode to it. And the mode I want is out in. So first out and then in. And with that, we already have the fix. So we have a nice transition. And lastly, I would also like to introduce a best practice here is that you should add a name. And I'm going to add a name of fade. And then this fade name should be reflected down in those CSS classes. So instead of this V, I'll simply add that fade name. Just like that. So transition is really that simple. Now I also want to extract this transition into a separate component so I can make it reusable. So I'm just going to copy it from here, and in components I'm going to make a new component and I'll name it fade transition.view. And inside in the template I'm going to add that, and instead of this slot, instead of this component, I'll use a slot so I can pass in the component. And of course, I'll also need the style scoped block. And in this style scoped, I'm just going to grab it all. So simply let's cut it out. And here we can add that. With that, we are now ready to use it in that app.view. So in the script, let's import it. Let's say import, and I want to say fade transition from @/component/fade transition.view. And then this fade transition is what I'll use instead of this raw transition component. So let's get rid of that. And here I can simply add this fade transition. With that, if we reload, we should still be able to get that transition, and we do. And now we have a reusable fade transition component that we can use in other places of our application without writing all this over again. Now, to speed up the development and to keep the duration of this course short, I need you to copy certain things. And those certain things are no view logic, no nothing. It's just markups and some Tailwind styling, which you are already familiar with. So in general settings, inside of the div, we now have these new things. So inside the div, we just have this h2 and this form. So I want you to pause the video here and just copy top to bottom. It's just plain basic HTML. So stop the video here. And now let's move to main.css. And in this main.css, just go ahead and add these styles. These are all Tailwind specific styles for certain things: input, text area, label, input, select, and button primary, which is this button here. So again, stop the video and grab this style. Now, later down the line, I am going to introduce so-called keep alive, which simply means that here in this text field, if I write something, and then if I change the tab and come back, you see it's gone. And keep alive would keep all these things here. Also, I'm going to introduce how we can write something here and then click the save, and then later when we restart this app, we still retain all those values. So for all those things to work properly, we need to keep track of all the separate datas that we have. And that's why we are now going to create a composable, because if you remember, composable is used to share states and execute logics, right? So in this src, I'm going to create composables, and the file is going to be use settings.ts. Now inside of this, first let's import ref, because we will have a reactive variable here, from view. And for the general settings tracking thing, right, I'm going to create an interface that describes what a general settings should have. So let's start with that. I'm going to say interface, and I'm going to name it general settings. And there I will have a few properties. So the first one would be this username, then email, then about me, then the gender, and then the country. So the username, which is a string. Afterwards, let's add email, which is again a string. We then have about me, so just about, and this is a string too. Next we have gender, and I'll set it to a default of male. And then we have the country, which I'm going to default to USA. So with that, we have a general model of general settings, so what a general settings should have. And with that, let's now create the ref variable where we can track all this reactively. So let's make const general, and this will be a ref. And in this ref, we will put those general values. But to make this ref of type general settings, so we can only pass these values and nothing else, we add this type to this ref. Now, inside this, let's again call an about, and this will be empty. We are going to have the country, which we are setting to USA to begin with. We have the gender, which is male to begin with. We have our email and username. So for the email, I'll stick to empty string, and also for the username, I'll stick to empty string. And now with that, because this use composable is generally just a function, we need to make it exportable. So let's add export, and I'm going to say function, and it will be use settings. And then here we should add a return clause where for now I just want to return that general, just like that. Now with our use settings composable and also that general markup here, let's now connect them together so we can connect this data to this markup. So our markup stores data in this data. In general settings, let's import that. So outside the template, let's add the script section, script with the setup tag and also the lang set to TS. Now here I need the const general, so that general ref, which is equals to that use settings. And with that, we also got the import. Now let's plug them together. So this general with those markups. Let's grab this general and let's start at the top. So we have this div where we have the label of username and input of username. So here, you know the deal. We add the v model, which does the two-way binding. So v-model, and there we pass this general dot username. Next, let's go to the second div, which is for the email. And here, let's again add v-model, and we pass general dot email. Then let's go to about me, and in this text area, let's add the v model, and let's say general dot about. Next, the div is about gender, and here we have 3 inputs. So we need to add the v model with general gender for 3 of this. So let's do v-model, and it's going to be general dot gender. And the same for the next 2, so right here and here. And you see this male is already showing up because we have selected male as the default value. Next, let's go to the country, and in this select, we're going to add v model and pass general dot country. And with that, we are right here. And with that, even if we come to this view dev tools, there in this fade transition, there this anonymous component, there this base transition, and there this general settings. And you see we have this general object. If we expand it, we get to see the various fields. And even if I write something here, it shows up. Let's also add the email, and there it shows up. Let's change from male to female, and that then reflects. Now, I want to talk about this keep alive shortly. So the thing is, first let's create a new ref variable inside of this general settings just for demonstration, and I'm going to name it const. Const this will reset is equals to a ref, which is from view, and we must import it, and I'll set it to 0. And there where we have this button, I'm just going to, for now, add a click, and I'm going to say this will reset to ++, just for demonstration. So with that, watch what happens. So here in this general, if we track it in this DevTools, if I add some username, we see that this username showed up. And likewise, we can also increase this ref from here, which is similar to just adding, clicking on this button. So it's just the same, not a problem. And with that, actually, and I'll add this username here again, and I'll click this button again. So we increase this and we have something. Now, when we change this tabs here, right? So when we go to notification or privacy and then we come back, what's happening is this general component is getting unmounted. So it's being removed from the DOM and it's being destroyed. And when we come back to this general, it's again being mounted. So again, it's again been created. And see here now, for that general, our object, so general object still retains the old value currently for this session because that ref, general ref is coming from this use settings. But because this component, this general settings component is getting destroyed and recreated, so this ref here, this will reset ref is also getting reset and hence it became 0. But previously we took it to 10. And this is where keep alive comes in. So for example, if I were to track all this general settings data, like I'm doing it here, if I were to track all of this inside this general settings component, this would also get lost. This would get removed. Now the solution is in the parent component, so in the app.view, where we have this dynamic components, I can grab this and put it inside keep alive. And then inside I can pass this dynamic component. Now what would happen is, for example, in this general settings, now if I increase this will reset to maybe 7 and then change the view and come back. You see this still retains. Now, yet again, I want you to get some more markups. So just plain HTML for this notification settings. So pause the video here and just grab it. These are just plain basic HTML with no view logic. So that would look something like this. And now let's go to privacy settings. And here we have a look like this. So just grab this template. Pause the video here and grab it. So with this general composable and the markup creation and then plugging them all together, we now already have a good enough practice that in this use settings, we have this general settings type and then the ref that holds the data of this general. Likewise, I'm just going to comment separate them. Let's work on the notifications and privacy real quick. So for notifications, I'm going to add a new interface and I'm going to name it notifications settings. And this will have, like you see, an email and SMS which can be on or off. So in other words, Boolean. So it can be true and false. I'm going to add this email and I'm going to set it to that Boolean. Next, the SMS, which I'm again going to set to that Boolean. Now to capture the data of this notification settings, we will need a ref. So I'm going to do const notifications is equals to a ref, which is of type notification settings. And using that, I will get suggestions. So email, I'll set it to false to begin with, because I don't want the check mark to begin with. And also then the SMS, which I am going to initialize to false again. And actually, just to mix things up, I'm going to set this email to true. All right, so with that, our notifications part is done. Let's now work on the privacy part. So for privacy, I have this true false and then a select. So that would be a string. Great. Now let's make another interface for privacy settings. Actually, not privacy, but privacy settings. And like I said, this will have visibility. So visibility, which is false. And then it will have a string, which is not visibility, it's search recommendation. So this visibility will be string. And we will also have search recommendation, maybe search engine indexing. So the search index, I'm just going to say search indexing. And then this will be string, right? No, this will be Boolean. Just like that. And actually, for this visibility, this can either be private or public. So I just want to show you how to also add strict enforcing here. So then I'm going to make another type So I can do maybe a type, and I'm going to name it capital visibility. So with capital V, and this can then be either public or it can be private. And now this is the one I want to use instead of this string. And with that, I should also get the ref. So const privacy is equals to a ref method where the type is going to be this privacy settings. And in between, then I want the search indexing and I'll set it to false. And for the visibility, so visibility, I'll get some suggestion automatically. I'll set it to public for now. And with that, we should also make this notifications ref and this privacy ref exportable. So general, then notifications, and then privacy. Now the plugging in is pretty simple. Let's go to that notification settings and let's add a script with the setup, and it should have that lang of ts. And here I want to get the notification. So I'm going to say const notifications, and this will use the use settings just like that. And now this notifications can be used for both of these inputs. So for this first checkbox input, I'm going to say v dash model, and it should take that notifications dot email, which was set to true. And then I'm going to add one for the next input where it will be notifications.sms. And just like that, let's also complete this privacy settings. So I'm just going to grab this much. And instead of notifications, this now should be privacy. And then this privacy we are going to use for both the inputs. So for this first one, in this checkbox input, let's add a v-model and say privacy. And this is for search indexing. So right there. And for the next one, let's grab this much. And in the select part, we add that v-model, and this should be privacy dot visibility. And we set it to public, and hence that is what it's showing. Let's now persist our data. So if we write something here, and then if we close this website and come back again, we should retain all the things that we wrote for each of these fields. For that, we are going to use watcher, and in the ref where we are keeping track of all the data, there we're going to get it back from the local storage. And if you remember, watch is a function like this ref, which we import from view. So I'll grab that watch from ref, and I'll start off with this general. So here I'm going to add a watch, and the idea is whenever we write anything, it should immediately save it to the local storage. So in this watch, I'm going to watch this general, and whenever general changes, this watch should run. And then here I run a function where I get the value that got changed from that general. And in this function, I'm going to call local storage, and there I'm going to set item. And the table or the collection where I want to set this item would be named as general. And inside of this, I want to set all the value that I'm getting. Now, actually, I have to JSON stringify it, but I'll do it later. And then I should also make it deep, so any fields, any nested deep fields within this general also get tracked, just like that. And now here in this value, I should use JSON.stringify, and there then I should pass the value, just like that. And with that, we are already saving anything that we are writing. So anything that we save, it's getting saved. Now to retrieve it back, in this general, Let's grab this object first of all. So I'm just going to cut it out. And here actually I need to execute an anonymous function which will be executed immediately. So in this first parenthesis, I'm going to write all the logic, and all this logic should be executed immediately, hence this second pair of brackets. Now in this first pair, let's call a function. So I'll call a function just like that, an empty function, and inside I'm going to say const stored is equals to local storage dot get item, and that get item should be gotten from that general. And with that, so with this here, we are going to return if stored is not equals to null, then we are going to json dot parse the stored, else we will return the thing that we copied, so this here, and we don't need that. So with that, if we restart, you see our data now persists. Even if we change all the things here, for example, we change it, I say here 345 and 123 and some text here. And then if I restart, you see we still persist all the things. All right, now let's do some exercise on TypeScript. Because as you can imagine, this much here is a lot of things. We are getting this item from local storage with this general key, and then we are parsing it, and then we are also setting some default object. Now, this much can actually be reused. So basically this much here. So I'm just going to Control C to copy it out, or maybe Control X to copy it out. And I'm going to create a new function. So I'm going to name it init and const init, which is equals to this function that is going to run. And in this function body, I'm going to paste whatever I took from there. Now to make this init really general, and actually I'm just going to cut it out and put it at the top. All right. Now to make it general, we can't really have this general sitting in here. So let's accept a key. And then we have to pass the type of this key, which will be string. And then we can replace this key right here. Now what about this object here? For this object, let's cut it out, and I'm going to say here defaults, not default, but defaults. And what should the type of this object be? Because this first one was of type general settings. The next one is notification settings. So to make it general, we need to make it generics. So here, I'm going to add this generic T, which I'm going to pass right here. So this defaults is of type this T. And with that, we can simply pass this defaults here. Now it's time that we use this init function. So inside of this general settings, I'm just going to remove this, and then I'm going to call that init. And this init is going to take that key, which is general, and then this object. Now this init should also get the generic type, which is this general settings, just like that. Now let's work on the next ones. So we're now going to go to this notifications, and there I'm just going to grab this object and bring that init, where the type is going to be notification settings, and in the body the key is going to be notifications, and then we have the defaults, which is this object. Likewise, let's go for this privacy, and here let's grab this object body and pass that init function, and this init function will get that privacy settings type, and the first value is the key, which is this privacy, and then the second value, which is that defaults, and that would be this object. And with that, we have shrinked this code into this generic function, which we are then reusing multiple times. So with our init function being used by the generics, so we can now add this watch for this other notifications and privacy settings, so they also get saved the moment we change anything. And like you imagine, you can also compartmentalize them into reusable logic, but for now I'm not going to do that, just to keep this tutorial short and sweet. So for this notification settings, let's add this watch again, and we want to watch this notifications instead of general, and then the key, also the set item key, would be that notifications. Likewise, let's grab this watch and paste it one more time for this privacy. So let's reflect it here and here. With that, we can now change certain things, and if we restart, we should persist. And actually we do. All we had to do is just restart. Let's go to privacy, set it to on and set it to private. And if we restart and go to privacy, indeed we persist all the things. Let's now build a notification system for our application. And the idea is that we are going to learn about building such a toast notification, and toast notification would be a widget that shows you some message and then disappears after a while. So that would be, for example, when we click the save, it shows up right here. And it is going to go out after 5 seconds, or we can just click OK. And also the thing is that we're going to learn about the teleport component, because this teleport lets us show this notification in an absolute position within our body. So no matter in which view we are, it doesn't matter. Whenever our toast notification shows up, it shows as the topmost layer using that teleport component, which we're going to learn. Let's start off by building another composable. So a composable that is responsible for those toast notifications. So a composable that keeps track of all the notifications using a ref, and also has the methods, so functions for adding notifications and removing notifications. So in that composables folder, I'm going to create a new one, use toast notifications.ts. And now inside, let's start working. Um, First, we should import ref, as always, because we want to keep track of some reactive data. So ref from view. And then I'm going to explain a notification. So I'm going to make an interface, and I'm going to name it toast notification. So what is a toast notification? That's what I'm defining here. And it will have an ID, which will be a number, and then a message. So a message, which will be a string. So basically that is what a toast notification is, at least for our app. And now we should also make that const notifications, where we keep track of the notifications, which is equals to a ref, and this ref is of type toast notification. I mean an array of toast notification, because inside of this ref we are going to keep track of an array of notifications, right? Many notifications, so to say. And we should actually also make it exportable, so export function, and we're going to name it use toast notifications, inside of which we should add that return clause. And for now, let's just return these notifications. Right. Next, let's work on the functions to add notification and remove notification. So after this notifications, let's add a new function. So I'm just going to say const add toast notifications. And this will be this function here, where I need to expect a message. So I will get a message from outside. So a message which is of type string. And then within this function, I want to also generate an ID. So I'm going to say const ID is equals to date dot now. So this gives me a random enough number, a unique random number. And then I'll call that notifications array, and there inside of its value, I want to push a new notification. So I'm just going to push a new object body where the ID is just going to be this ID, and also then the message, just like that. And using JavaScript, I also want to set a timeout. So after some time, it gets removed, just like you see here. For example, if I click this, you see after some time, it gets automatically removed. So here we are going to call set timeout, and set timeout is a method where we are going to pass a function first of all, and this function is going to call remove, R-E-M-O-V-E, remove toast notification, and that is a function that we're going to create which will take an ID. And after this expression, we will also set the time. So for example, 5 seconds. So 5,000 milliseconds equals to 5 seconds. And after 5 seconds, that toast notification will get removed. And with that, let's work on this remove toast notification. Let's add const remove toast notification, which is again a new function. And this function is very simple. We call that notifications and there the value. And you guessed it, it should be equals to the new toast notifications.value where we run the filter method. And in this filter method, we will get each of those notifications, and we just want to check where the n.id is not equals to the ID that we get. And actually, we should also expect the ID here because we are passing it right here. And this ID is of type number. And with that, let's make these two functions exportable too, just like that. And with this composable now fully ready, in the next video, let's configure it. Now, I actually want you to copy some code because these codes are reusable. You can reuse it multiple times for various different applications. So in the components folder, I want you to create this toast notifications.view. So this component which would be responsible for that toast notification. And here then we bring this teleport component which is built into view. And to this we pass this to attribute where we simply point to the body, that this teleport component should teleport all its content, so the things that we're going to write inside should teleport things to the body. And that would look something like this. So we have the unordered list, so ordered list with a class, and then inside we have this list items where we are iterating over all the notifications which we get from our use notifications. And of course we add the key and also added a class to style them. And now inside this list item we have this div that has some text styling and that is showing the message from each notification from that use notifications. And then we have this button which is responsible for removing the notification. So pause the video here and grab this code. And with that, we have those classes, so stylings. And for this, we are going to go to main.css and we have this simple 3 classes. So pause the video again and just grab these styling classes. And so with our toast notifications composable and the component created and plugged in, it's now just a matter of using it. So in app.view, I'm going to place that toast notification component somewhere, and it can be really anywhere. So just under this fade transition, I'm going to add that. So toast notification right here. And so here we have the full component. And please be careful, there should not be any type key in front of this toast notification component. So I'm just going to remove that and also remove this view. Perfect. So we have our toast notification added to app.view. It's now that just that we have to trigger it from somewhere. And I'm going to go to that general settings, and here I'm going to import it. So I'm going to say const, and this will be equals to use toast notifications. So we get that toast notification import. And from here, we want that add toast notification. Now we have to use this add toast notification with something. So I'm just going to create a function here, and I'm going to name it const save, which is equals to an arrow function where we call that add toast notification, and we're going to say general settings saved. And I'm just going to do it for this general tab, and I want you to do it yourself for the notifications and privacy. Now this save should be plugged into this button, and if we do that, so add click, and there we call that save. Let's try it. So if I click save, we have it. But you see we have a problem. And this problem is what we are going to discuss in the next video. But let's see the solution. Actually, what we should do is whenever we have a form, we should add this at submit.prevent. Now this can be just like this. So here, if we click now save, you see it doesn't reload anymore, and we show our toast notification for 5 seconds. So that's one solution. The other solution is that because this button is within the form already and it has this type of submit, what we can do is we can optionally not include this at click.save here. We can remove it from here and just up there where we are saying at submit.prevent. So this at submit.prevent is preventing this web page from reloading whenever we click this button, because and then this at submit.prevent can be equal to that save. And with that, if we now save, you see it still works. So let's discuss that at submit.prevent modifier. Let's change this to notifications tab where we don't have that at submit.prevent for this form. And watch what happens. Whenever I click the save, the page reloads. And that is the default behavior of HTML by itself. Whenever you have a form in HTML and there you have a button that is of type submit, so whenever you click that, your HTML tries to submit it to some server, which is not the case here, right? We don't have any server plugged in. And so in Vue, whenever you have a form, you should always add this at submit, so the submit, and you prevent its behavior. So you say at submit.prevent. And we're going to do this also for this privacy settings, just like that. And with this, if I click this save, you see we don't have that reload going on over and over again. And so now, please go ahead and bring that notification settings, notifications composable, and plug it to both of this.